Hi friends, it's your boy Cranberry Enthusiast, and I got a new cheap camera I thought I'd try out. Hope it works well enough. I'm going to be reading a script here, so don't mind me if my eyes are bouncing like all over the place, cause welcome to this brand new video series that, as I'm sure you may have guessed, will be essentially a Bible study. That being said, this is probably not going to be what you probably think of when you think of Bible study. We aren't going to be having a bunch of chairs up here and people like, I don't know. Anyway, this is going to be essentially a video version and of a... Let me try that sentence again. This is going to be essentially a video version of a group of blog Bible commentary series that I did a few years ago. And it's been a while since I've done one of those in particular, although I do them a lot in like my free time and stuff. So anyway, another thing you'll probably have noticed is that this is going to be a very unedited series, hence I just am going to be trying to roll with it as though this was like a live stream, but it obviously is not a live stream unless you're watching this as I'm recording it, which in that case I am not alone here. Man, doing things live without editing is going to take my brain some getting used to, but I will get there, hopefully by the end of this series. But anyway, in short, I'm going to be reading through a text from the Bible. I have one of my Bibles right here, I'm blessed with multiple, and offering my thoughts, questions, whatever else comes to mind. Essentially, like, and that's why I call it a Bible study, but I don't know, and maybe you've been to Bible studies that are going to be more interesting than this series, and if that's true, good for you. As you probably know from the title, this video will be focusing on the first chapter of the book of Daniel, and since Daniel has 12 chapters, last night I was like, this is going to be the perfect book to go through, because I'm hoping to put out one of these videos each month throughout this entire year, 2023. If you didn't know what year I'm filming this in, you might be watching it later. Hello, future space people. And so anyway, these videos, as I said, they're going to be unscripted. Aside from the intro section, I may say something absolutely weird or something that I don't even agree with or something I don't even mean or not even realize that I say. And if so, you can feel free to comment below if it seems like I'm saying something really strange or something that, even if it's just something that you don't understand or like, I don't know. I can't think of a good example, but just know that it's going to be very unedited, very off the cuff. I may like say one thing one week and then completely disagree with myself the next week, depending on circumstances. Anyway, I am over explaining too much, as I tend to do when I just turn on the camera and go. But anyway, aside from this intro section again, which is, I have the script right there. Anyway, but it will, as I said before, probably have more like a live stream after the fact feel. So there's that, just as you probably know way too well right now. But regardless of what you believe or how much you know or don't know about the Bible, feel free to tune in. This is kind of a series for absolutely anyone who's interested in, I guess who's interested like in me and wants to hear me read the Bible and talk about Bible things. And if you have your own thoughts or questions or ideas about what we're reading together, you can feel free to comment that down below in the comment section, which is like down below my feet, I suppose, or I don't know. Anyway, if it wasn't obvious, I believe Jesus Christ is legit, namely he's God himself, and also that he is love in the purest sense of the word. There's not going to be any proselytizing, which is a fancy word you can look up later if you so choose, regarding this series. The whole point is I'm going to be reading and studying something in the Bible, and if you want to tune in, welcome aboard. And even if you want to tune in, but even if you don't believe anything the Bible says, which is kind of weird because the Bible says things like trees exist and ancient Rome was a real place and birds can fly, and I would hope that you would like believe those things. But anyway, I hope the series will be interesting and even comical at times for you. So yeah, this is not really trying to create a community here so much as I'm just trying to like document my personal Bible study and stuff, and I guess showing you what I do if you want to kind of get inspired, because Unfortunately, there's a lot of Bible study methods and procedures that are very, very uninspiring and can kind of suck life and joy out of what should be an enriching experience, in my humble opinion. So anyway, a broad encouragement for us collectively that I kind of always try to keep in mind is to always seek after the truth, and even if it is the most awful thing in the world, like, you know, to quote a song, I would rather have the truth than something insincere, even if that's a horrible truth that like completely destroys my life, which is weird to think about, but I've come to that conviction. I'm an optimist at heart, but the world, which includes basically every religious institution, by the way, the world does not mean non-religious, at least in like the biblical sense, which is something that I learned last year. But anyway, the world keeps trying to make me a pessimist, it seems like. But anyway, let's begin with the book of Daniel, shall we? No transition, because this is like a live. This is going to be quite the interesting series. Hopefully you're enjoying yourself so far. Thank you for tuning in. And hopefully I will get way better at these videos as they go. That, you know, the best way to get started is to just get started, I suppose. So, we're starting in the book of Daniel, chapter 1. I will be using the NASB, the New American Standard Bible, 2020 edition. But you can follow along. It's available online, or you can not follow along, or use a different translation if you want. But let's go. So, Daniel chapter 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Pause. So, we have this king with a funny name. Well, 2 kings, technically. Jehoiakim sounds like you're, like, getting out. Sounds like you're, like, yeah, you have, like, some phlegm in your throat, and you're trying to... Jehoiakim. I love biblical names so much. I would probably not name my child Jehoiakim, but anyway. So 3rd year, so it hits his 3rd year. So Jehoiakim has just started his reign, and I'm gonna do a quick Google search and see if we can get some more information on Jehoiakim. So he was the 2nd son of King Josiah. Josiah was a good king, but I think Jehoiakim was not a very good king. Jehoiakim, how old was he when he became king? Well, it doesn't say. I think it might say somewhere. Feel free, if you're one of those people who loves to like search up things, feel free to search how old Jehoiakim was when he became king of Judah, and he might have been like the puppet king of Judah, because I think Egypt invaded. I don't know. Anyway, but the point is, it's his 3rd year, and according to Wikipedia, which I think is straight from the Bible, is where they're sourcing that, he only reigned for 11 years, so has a fairly short reign, but but this is kind of more toward the beginning. So anyway, Nebuchadnezzar, so he's the king of Babylon, and so Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem and besieged it, which would involve what you would probably imagine, a country or a city being besieged. You have old ancient cities with big walls to keep people out, and then you have the siege, so like the invading army surrounds the city and then prevents like anyone from entering or leaving the city, or, you know, without threat of death, I suppose. And so, yeah, and there are other places in the Bible that I think describe this particular thing. Anyway, I'm spending way too long on the first verse, but this is what happens sometimes. I will sometimes just get caught up in a single verse, or just trying to go over exactly what's going on. So anyway, so Nebuchadnezzar is besieging Jerusalem, and it says, "And the Lord handed Jehoiakim, king of Judah, over to him, along with some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God." Okay, a lot there. Um, so the Lord handed Jehoiakim, which I'm probably mispronouncing his name, to be honest. I mispronounced most things. I'm so sorry. I'm American, but anyway, you can see for yourself how it's spelled. So the Lord, and it's interesting here too, because a lot of times in the Old Testament, or so I've learned, just because it says necessarily that the Lord did it, does not necessarily mean that God was very meticulously doing it. A lot of times, the way it's written in Hebrew is to give like God the glory, or to show that God was still in control, basically, so to speak. Because like my thought is like, you know, did God hate Jehoiakim, king of Judah? Did God like hate the people of Judah? Like he was like, yeah, I hate these people. I want them to suffer, and so I'm gonna like hand them over to this Nebuchadnezzar guy who's probably awful. And well, we will learn more about his endeavors here. But I don't really think that's the case. I think that the point is that like Jehoiakim, which if I remember right, he was not a very good, like he definitely was not like seeking after God, and so God had a purpose in Jehoiakim, king of Judah, being handed over to Nebuchadnezzar. And then this is interesting too, because the Lord handed Jehoiakim, king of Judah, over to him, along with some of the vessels of the house of God. So like it says that like the Lord handed over some of the vessels of the house of God to Nebuchadnezzar, which is really interesting. Like this is something I've never come. I've read the book of Daniel a few times now, and I've never have caught that detail before. It ascribes that the Lord handed over, like, which again is probably a similar thing. You know, did God want Nebuchadnezzar to be taking the vessels of the house of God? I don't think so. And as we'll, again, spoiler alert, in later chapters we will learn that you know, you should not disrespect God or take his things, basically, for lack of a better term. Anyway, so he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, brought the vessels and treasury of his God. Next verse, then the king told Ashpenaz, the chief of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some of the royal family and of the nobles. So we got this new guy, Ashpenaz. He's the chief of Nebuchadnezzar's officials, and so he's bringing in a bunch of young men, basically. And that sentence continues, youths in whom there was no impairment, who were good-looking, suitable for instruction in every kind of expertise, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge, and who had the ability to serve in the king's court. And he ordered Ashpenaz to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. Now, Chaldeans, what is a Chaldean, actually? Is it synonymous with just Babylonian? Chaldean meaning. The Chaldeans were an ancient people who lived in Chaldea around 800 BC and ruled Babylonia 625 to 539 BC. They were renowned as astronomers and astrologers. So it's like an ancient. So Chaldeans, I think like the Persians, the Babylonians, like it's all kind of related. And so the Chaldeans specifically, it seems like they're with like, you know, astronomy and astrology, which it kind of, well, we're going to talk more about astrology, believe it or not, and some interconnected stuff between the Old and New Testament. It's kind of, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the king, so brought in a bunch of youths, so a bunch of young men, who really, like, you know, their homeland was just overtaken, and they're, you know, they are going through pretty weird part of life right now. Like it's hard to imagine living in America in the 21st century, like for a foreign army to arrive and be like, hey, we're taking like all your people to our land, like, and then so they were presented there, and they were good looking, suitable for instruction, and every kind of expertise. So in other words, like good, healthy, strong, smart young men that are and Nebuchadnezzar is like to the Ashpenaz guy, hey, teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. So it's like training them to be kind of like probably a part of the king's entourage of like smart, healthy, strong people, because especially if you're an ancient king, you probably want to surround yourself with people who are trained and smart, and because life was quite different back then. The king also allotted for them a daily ration from the king's choice food, meaning probably like really, like probably food that tasted really good but probably wasn't super healthy, and from the wine which he drank, and ordered that they be educated for 3 years, at the end of which they were to enter the king's personal service. So there we go. Yeah, so these young men are going to be entering the king's personal service, just to, help the king and with whatever the king's got going on. King business, I suppose. So the king, it's almost like this kind of, these young men who were taken from their homeland, it's like they're a part of this like Nebuchadnezzar's academy, the Nebuchadnezzar Academy. So it's very much like almost like a boarding school or something that they're going to, but obviously kind of a bit worse. And one thing that when I was younger, I was always like, because also, here, let me read this and then I'll get to my point. Now among them from the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And those 4 guys will be focusing a lot on in the book of Daniel, and obviously one of them is the book's named after. So, now what was I going to say before? So Daniel and his friends, they're in basically Nebuchadnezzar's. Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. I've always wondered if like Daniel and his friends were they taken from their families? Were they able to like see their families and stuff? And I can't like confidently say one or the other, but given like the fact that they are like all taken together, I would imagine that like Daniel would have been able to see his parents if they were still alive, I guess is also the thing too, because if like maybe his father was in the army or something and died in the fight with the siege or something, which would be awful, but anyway, but thankfully when I was younger, like the thought of like being taken away from like my home and everyone I knew was like super nerve-wracking, and I'm like, it still would be really weird for me to like, for Canada to invade the United States and to like take me away, and I'm gonna go serve the King of Canada now with whatever he's gonna go through the King of Canada's 3-year program and eat Canadian food and drink maple syrup and that would be a bit of a crazy thing, especially because like it's not even my own choice of something that I'm doing, or it's I'm kind of being forced into this, but and I also wonder too how old these guys were, but they must have been old enough that they were like, this was probably close to like college age, or at least college level experience, and maybe not, maybe more like high school, maybe they were only like 12 or something, which people tended to mature faster than we as Americans tend to mature, I think. Back then, I mean, people were getting married when they were like 12 years old, which is like, the ancient world was quite interesting in a number of ways. So, anyway, continuing on, then the commander of the officials assigned new names to them, and to Daniel he assigned the name Belteshazzar, or Belshazzar, I've heard it pronounced, Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. And so there you got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If that sounds familiar, we'll be getting into excuse me, into that record here in a couple of chapters, I do believe. But anyway, here we go. But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank, so he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. Excuse me. Talking so much, I'm losing my voice. I'm also somewhat getting over being sick. Oh. Excuse me. We're about halfway, so and it's probably going to go a little faster from here. But so yeah, Daniel. So he is like, I'm not going to eat the king's choice food, and that. So if you're not aware, and you may well be aware, but if you're not aware, in ancient Israel, according to the Old Testament law, there were certain things that the ancient Jews were not allowed to eat. Namely, like pigs is one thing. That's why, like, that's what kosher means, right? That it doesn't have like, probably means more than just like it doesn't have pig in it. But so yeah, but other cultures, they would eat. So like the king's choice food is probably, like maybe some hot dogs or something. And the wine is probably like not very good wine. Like maybe it's like really hard liquor that like you can only get accustomed to if you're drinking way beyond what is healthy. But anyway, so Daniel, so he's resolved that he's going to be just, trying to eat healthy and whatnot. Now, and then it says, now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials, which is cool too. The commander of the officials said to Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has allotted your food and your drink, for why should he see your faces looking gaunt in comparison to the youths who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. I don't know why he got an accent. Further on I read that sentence, but so yeah, so the commander of the officials is like, hey, I like you, Daniel. You're a good guy, but I'm afraid of Nebuchadnezzar guy because he like kills a bunch of people, and if he's the king, he's given you this food and drink, and if you don't eat his food, like if you're not well nourished, you're gonna look not very good, and so like I don't want him to like to see that you're not looking very good, and then you would make me forfeit my head to the king, because the king is not going to he might kill you too, but he's going to definitely kill me for not taking proper care of you, if so like that's, yeah, I'm afraid, Daniel, is basically what the commander is saying. And shout out God granting Daniel favor and compassion on the side of the commander of the officials too, which I would imagine isn't that Daniel just sat and did nothing, but I imagine that God gave him opportunities, and Daniel probably showed that he was he's a good guy, so to speak. So anyway, but continuing on, but Daniel said to the overseer, whom the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please put your servants to the test for 10 days, and let us be given some vegetables to eat and water to drink. This is not a VeggieTales reference, but it would be amazing if it was. Then let our appearance be examined in your presence and in the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. First of all, shout out Daniel being like not only super cool and a good guy with a good heart, and like God is like gonna use this guy in crazy ways, as we're gonna soon see, but he's also just super respectful. Because I'm sure he gets it, and he's like, yeah, I don't know how well he knows the commander, but I'm assuming Daniel's like, he cares enough about the commander that like he doesn't want the commander to die, and like he would probably understand the commander's fear there, and so he's like, hey, please put us to the test for 10 days, so a little over a week, a reasonable period of time, and he's like, let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink, so just more healthy food, so to speak. And I'm sure they ate, because I can't imagine eating only vegetables and drinking water for 10 days. That might be kind of something cool to try, but I have a feeling if I talk to a doctor, they're going to be like, oh, you need carbohydrates and protein, and so it probably depends on what vegetables you eat, but most vegetables don't, so, and who knows, the word that's translated as vegetables might be a broader term too, like, maybe they did also like eat bread, maybe like bread, because bread comes from plants, so like they ate that. Maybe it was more like a vegetarian diet as opposed to, because yeah, you can definitely get all you need from a vegetarian diet, at least so I'm told. I may go vegetarian at some point, not for a real spiritual purpose, but a lot of times like I Just I prefer eating more plant stuff to eating meat. But anyway, side tangent. Where were we? Then let our appearance be examined. So yeah, so he's like, let's do this test, and hey, see how it is at the end of 10 days, then you can make the decision. And so, so the next verse, so we listened to them in this matter, and put them to the test for 10 days. So that seemed good to the commander of the officials, and I wonder if that's Ashpenaz, because Ashpenaz back earlier is called the chief of the officials, and then says that God granted Daniel favor in the side of the commander of the officials. So this is the commander we're talking about, but so maybe it's Ashpenaz, maybe not. I don't know. So at the end of 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. Now, the word for fatter here, bruh, this is one of those funny things where it's like where fatter does not mean in this context that they were like, you know, obese or like, because can you imagine? So there's the young guys who are eating the king's choice food. They're eating meat and probably candy, sweets, stuff that's not very healthy, and stuff that's probably full of fat and stuff. And then you have Daniel and his friends eating vegetables. Daniel and his friends get fatter than the people eating the more fatty foods. It's kind of hilarious, but I'm sure that the word here, at least, and you can research too and see if because I'm curious what the word would exactly be for fatter there, because it probably means something more like they looked more healthy, like maybe their muscles were fatter, so to speak, like maybe and yeah, and it says that their appearance seemed better, and so anyway, so going on. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food and the wine they were to drink, and kept giving them vegetables. So cool. So it was like absolutely success, and it's like obviously Daniel trying to honor God through his through following the Old Testament law, especially with even day-to-day stuff about like what he eats and drinks, even though, you know, it wasn't Daniel's choice that the Babylon came and took everybody away, but still it's like he's kind of, even though it's maybe not super focused, it seems like Daniel's kind of trusting God, and like he recognizes that God is God everywhere, not just in your own little town or house or church or wherever you are, so to speak. So anyway, shout out Daniel. He's for real like one of my most favorite people in the Old Testament. And so then at the, and as for these 4 youths, so Daniel and his 3 friends, God gave them knowledge and intelligence and every kind of literature and expertise. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. So they kind of become like wise men, basically. And that's, I think, kind of what the king was kind of training them for. Also, side note, but Daniel and his friends having like a D&D or like RPG group would be completely insane. Can you imagine that would just be amazing. I wonder if they ever did something like that in their free time for fun, just like played some sort of like game like that, and like given all their knowledge and intelligence and every kind of literature and expertise. So anyway, then at the end of the days which the king had specified for presenting them, the commander of the officials presented them before Nebuchadnezzar, which is probably about like 3 years, like he was saying, so if I'm understanding that right. And the king talked with them, and out of them all, not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's personal service. How about that? As for every matter of expertise and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them 10 times better than all the soothsayer priests and conjurers who were in all his realm. So like, back then people, well, kings and stuff, they had like their wise men, their magicians, their people who could like, some probably studied like dark arts and like kind of evil practices and stuff, and others, it seems like were kind of maybe like the more modern equivalent to doctors, like they were just knew a lot about herbs and stuff maybe. But anyway, and last verse of the chapter. And Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. Okay, so that's Daniel chapter 1. And so what do we have here? So we have kind of a quick recap, which I think it's in like either 2 Kings or 2 Chronicles. You can find the siege of Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar takes it over. Nebuchadnezzar takes a bunch of people from Israel. Excuse me, technically Judah, because Israel and Judah had split, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But, so Nebuchadnezzar takes, and then he gets a bunch of like the healthy-looking young guys, and then he kind of gets them enrolled in the Nebuchadnezzar Academy of 3 years, and through Daniel and his friends, like following what God had prescribed in the Old Testament law, and then they seem to be very blessed for that. It's like the king, like they kind of rose to the top of their class, and they were like the it people, so to speak. Which, man, I never realized it before. The first chapter of Daniel really is reminiscent of, like, I don't know, like I've never read like Harry Potter, for instance, but like it like knowing what little I do know about it makes me think of like kind of Harry Potter and his friends, like, well, and I don't know, because was Harry Potter the top of his class? I don't know. That's not a good example. I don't know anything about Harry Potter, but yeah. So it's just really cool, and yeah, I'm sure everything will probably go great for Daniel. He'll just be on the up and up and up, and things will be all hunky dory, and just only good things will happen from now on, right? Like. In case you couldn't tell, that was kind of jokey sarcasm, because no, in fact, starting in this next chapter, things are going to get pretty rough, and Daniel is going to be faced with some pretty wild things, Daniel and his friends, and things are going to get even more crazy. If you know anything about Daniel, you probably know the most famous stories, and I can't wait to get into those, because it's pretty wild, especially when you take a step back and think, imagine this, happening, as opposed to thinking of it like, a children's Sunday school story, so to speak, which I love to do. So, but anyway, that's Daniel chapter 1, and that's the first episode of this series. Hopefully you enjoyed this in some way. If not, no worries. Yeah, I'm really excited for this series, and I'm excited to kind of keep practicing and getting better at this type of off-the-cuff, spontaneous study. And yeah, if you like it, feel free to let me know somewhere in the comments, or contacting me directly. I feel like my community on here is so small, which is really nice. I never make any efforts to really try to like grow my YouTube community. It's just, if you somehow discover me, and if you like what you see, great, and if you don't have to watch. So that's my general philosophy on things. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope that the camera actually is recording this, because this is a new camera. I don't know if it shuts off after so long, but anyway, thanks to y'all for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Oh, and feel free to leave any comments or questions again below. I would love to have a discussion if any part of this video, or of anything, if there was something that stood out to you as especially interesting, or whatnot. So anyway, see you all later.